Your parents are here, with a woman who looks exactly like you." My daughter's friend whispered those words through the phone, while the three of us were eating breakfast in Hawaii. Claire looked at my wife, then at me. We were both sitting beside her. "That's impossible," Claire said. "My parents are sitting beside me in Hawaii."
Her friend's voice became quieter. "Then come to the bank now. They are trying to move all the money from Hale Printworks." Claire turned the phone so I could hear. Behind her shoulder, the ocean was bright enough to hurt my eyes. Diane still had a yellow flower tucked above one ear. I was holding a cup of coffee with both hands. At our bank, 4,000 miles away, 3 strangers were wearing our faces. My name is Martin Hale. I was 70 years old, recently retired, and still getting used to mornings that did not begin with the smell of ink. For 41 years, I ran a commercial print shop with my wife. Claire grew up sorting paper samples after school and later became our best designer. When we sold the building that spring, the $1,800,000 in proceeds went into a company account owned by the 3 of us. Any transfer of the full amount required all 3 managing members to appear and approve it. That morning, 3 people had appeared. They just were not us. Claire's friend worked in the bank's commercial loan division, 2 floors above the lobby. She knew our family from school fundraisers and from the years our shop printed the bank's charity programs. She had passed the glass conference room and seen an older couple sitting beside a young woman with Claire's dark hair, narrow chin, and habit of tucking one thumb beneath the other. The resemblance stopped her. The transfer amount frightened her. She could not send us private bank records, and she did not try. She walked directly to the fraud desk, then called Claire because she believed an identity crime might be happening in real time. I asked her one question: "Has any money left?" "The fraud officer is checking." I ended the call and used the number printed on the back of my bank card. The officer verified me through the bank's normal process. Diane and Claire did the same on separate calls. I told him none of us had authorized a transfer and that all 3 genuine account owners were physically together in Hawaii. He placed an immediate fraud hold before the wire was released. For that minute, the money was safe. Our names were not. The officer said the visitors had brought identity documents, a unanimous company resolution, and a destination account opened for a development business. Their appearance and paperwork had opened enhanced review, not completed the transfer. The bank was already holding them while it checked signatures and called the owners through contact information already on file. Claire's friend had not single-handedly saved $1,800,000. She had recognized the impossible scene and added a human warning while the bank's own safeguards were still working. The young woman had answered preliminary questions using details from Claire's life. I took a photograph of the breakfast table. Diane, Claire, and I stood together with the hotel terrace behind us. I asked a server to remain in the edge of the frame, then requested that hotel security preserve the lobby record showing when we entered for breakfast. The photograph was not revenge. It was an alibi. I sent it through the bank's secure channel with our travel confirmation. Then I made the decision that changed the rest of our family. I hired a licensed investigator in our home state who had handled business identity cases. I chose him, described what needed protection, and told him the boundaries before he accepted. He could examine the real bank appearance, public business records, and commercial contacts already connected to the transfer. Under our fictional state's law, he could preserve public conduct and a call recorded with the consent of a person actually participating in it. He could not enter anyone's home, access private messages, invent a second transfer, impersonate a bank officer, or coach a family member into manufacturing a confession. "I need to know who used our faces," I said. "I do not need a trick." "Good," he answered. 3 matching faces require preparation. Preparation usually leaves a bill. Claire heard me hire him. "Dad, "You're treating this like Grant did it." Grant was her husband. He was also the only close family member who knew the exact dates of our Hawaii trip and had declined to come. He said a project deadline kept him home. I looked at my daughter. Fear had already begun doing what fear does inside a family. It had taken a fact and attached the nearest name to it. "I'm treating it like someone knew where we would be," I said. "That is not the same as deciding who." Diane reached across the table and covered Claire's hand. The flower above my wife's ear had begun to wilt. We returned to our hotel room instead of the beach. The bank sent secure still images after taking the required fraud reports from all three of us. The images were not sharp enough to make the strangers feel unreal. They made them worse. The man pretending to be me wore a tan jacket like one I owned. His hair had been cut around his ears the way mine was. He had even placed reading glasses in his breast pocket. The woman beside him wore her silver hair in Diane's soft side part. Diane enlarged the image. "That is a wig," she said, "and the part comes from the Christmas picture, not from how I wear it now." She had changed her hair after that photograph. Whoever styled the woman had copied an old image instead of a living person. The young woman wore a blue blouse identical to the one Claire had worn in our previous Christmas photograph. Grant had taken that picture at our house. He had asked us to stand closer because the tree looked empty between us. I did not say that aloud. "Not yet," the bank explained the part that mattered. Hale Printworks holdings still existed because the building sale had closed before we finished dividing the proceeds. Diane, Claire, and I were its three managers. The bank profile required unanimous approval for a transfer above $100,000. The false resolution claimed we had voted to send the full $1,800,000 to an account described as a reinvestment escrow. The destination belonged to a development company. The bank would not give us the beneficial owner while the investigation was open, but the word development tightened Claire's face. Grant developed small commercial properties. His most recent project had stopped halfway through construction. "Lots of companies use that word," Claire said. "They do," I answered. I had spent my working life around copies. A copy can be perfect in color and still carry no authority. You learn to ask who approved the proof, which version was final, and whether the person at the counter has the right to change it. I did not become a detective because I knew paper. I simply knew that looking familiar was not the same as being authorized. The investigator began with the bank's preserved record and the documents our attorney obtained through the company. He did not receive free access to every camera or account because I asked. The bank protected its evidence, and our attorney protected ours. His first job was to identify where the false family image came from. The answer arrived before dinner. The photograph used on the counterfeit company identification had been cropped from our Christmas picture. My left shoulder still carried the edge of the tree ribbon. Diane's image contained a pale triangle from Claire's sleeve. Whoever prepared the cards had separated the three of us from one photograph and built three identities around the pieces. That proved preparation. It did not prove who prepared it. The forged resolution created a harder problem. It had been sent from Claire's company email address 4 days earlier. The message used her usual signature line. It referred to the building sale by its correct closing date. Attached were copies of Martin, Diane, and Claire Hale's supposed approvals. Claire remembered that her company email was still signed in on the shared desktop in her home office. Grant had used that computer before the trip to upload tax records for his development. The bank's security team confirmed the message had passed through that existing trusted session rather than a lookalike address. Claire's registered phone was signing in from Hawaii at the same time. That narrowed the doorway without proving who sat at the desk. Claire opened the attached resolution again and found something I had missed. Its page spacing came from an old Hale template she had adapted the previous year for one of Grant's development proposals. I made this version for him, she said. The family company stopped using it months ago. For the first time, my daughter had found a piece of the trail herself. Claire read the bank summary twice. They think I sent it. They know you dispute it, I said. That isn't what I asked. I understood. A freeze protects money. It does not remove suspicion from the person whose name opened the door. The bank had stopped a transfer, but someone had placed my daughter inside the crime. Grant called her 9 minutes later. Claire stared at his name until the phone almost stopped ringing. Then she answered on speaker. I just heard from the bank, he said. Someone used your work email. He sounded breathless, worried, and prepared. How did you hear? Claire asked. My bank's compliance team called about a frozen incoming wire to the development account. Someone may be using my company too. I wrote those words on hotel stationery, not because they proved guilt. Because he had learned the destination before the bank had told Claire whose company it was. Grant continued. They may think you initiated the transfer remotely. There's a member confirmation in your inbox. Sign it so I can show them the family had discussed reinvesting. Claire opened her laptop. I asked her to stop. Dad, if it clears this up, read what it confirms. The document did not cancel the wire. It said all 3 managers had previously authorized Grant to coordinate investments, and that any paperwork he submitted had been submitted with their knowledge. The signature box waited beneath Claire's name. Grant had not asked her to correct the record. He had asked her to adopt it. I'm not signing this, she said. His voice changed by 1 degree. Then the bank may treat you as the person who used your parents' identities. Diane closed her eyes. I leaned toward the phone. Grant, stop speaking to my daughter as if fear were legal advice. There was a pause. Martin, this is between Claire and me. Her signature is hers. The company is ours. The fraud report is already filed. He ended the call. Claire stood so quickly that the hotel chair struck the wall. You pushed him into a corner. He sent you a document that would make his actions yours. You don't know they're his. No, I said. And neither do you. That is why neither of us signs anything. She walked onto the balcony and closed the glass door behind her. For the first time since the bank call, the 3 real people in the photograph were no longer standing together. Diane watched our daughter through the glass. If you are right, her marriage is over. That is Claire's decision. And if you are wrong, then I will have accused no one. I will have preserved a document and asked a licensed person to follow the evidence. My wife looked at the hotel stationery, where I had written Grant's words. You already believe it. I believe he knows more than he should. Those were different statements, but they did not feel different to Claire. The bank disabled outgoing transfers from the family company account and required any future change to occur with the real owners in person after new identity review. That closed one escape route. It also made the false wire useless unless the impersonators returned. We still did not know whether they would. The investigator found a commercial casting notice posted 6 weeks earlier. It advertised a short internal training film about 3 generations handling a family business transition. Applicants were asked to resemble photographs supplied after selection. The casting packet included hair references, clothing sizes, reading glasses, and short rehearsal notes about how each of us moved. The performers had not been chosen because they were exact doubles. Similar faces had been pushed closer with wigs, makeup, and details copied from our photographs. The notice had been removed. But the casting service preserved its contract and payment record after receiving counsel's letter. The client had used a business name we did not recognize. The initial deposit came from a prepaid corporate card. That route did not identify Grant by itself. It identified preparation again. 3 adults had been cast. The older man was told he would play a retiring shop owner. The older woman was told she would play his wife. The young woman was told she would play their daughter during a filmed bank training exercise. The service had not been told the exercise would occur inside a real branch using real customer names. The investigator could not simply demand the performer's private information. The service contacted them through its own attorney and asked whether they would speak voluntarily. The older man did not answer. The older woman said she had left before the documents were signed because the setting felt wrong. The young woman asked one question: "Will someone pay the rest of what I was promised?" That question changed the investigation. She met the investigator with her own attorney. I was not present. Claire was not used as bait, and no one asked the performer to pretend she wanted another crime. She said the client had paid $5,000 before the first appearance and promised $10,000 more after a second identity review. At the first bank visit, she had used a card bearing Claire's name and photograph. She admitted she understood by then that it was not a training film. Her attorney did not ask us to erase that fact. He asked that her cooperation be documented and that prosecutors judge her conduct separately from the organizers. That was fair. Cooperation was evidence, not innocence. The investigator showed her only the parts of the casting packet that belonged to her. She identified the client's voice and the instructions he had given by phone. She knew him as Graham. Grant's middle name was Graham. Agan. Close was not proof. The young woman had a real unpaid compensation dispute. Her second payment was due after she returned to the bank. She wanted to call the client and say she would not go back until he explained what she had been made to do and paid what he owed. Under our fictional state's law, a person participating in that call could consent to record it. She chose to do so after speaking with her attorney. The investigator did not write questions for her. He did not imitate a bank employee, promise immunity, or tell her to accuse Grant. He preserved a genuine call about her own work and money. I had initiated the investigation. She owned the conversation. That distinction kept the evidence human and lawful. Our return flight left the next morning. Claire sat across the aisle from me and spoke only to Diane. I did not ask her to choose between her husband and her father at 30,000 feet. I asked the investigator to wait until we landed before any call occurred. Grant made his next move first. He sent Claire a string of messages saying the bank had accused him because of her family's suspicion. He said his business lenders would call a default on Friday if the family account remained frozen. He said hundreds of workers could lose paychecks because Martin had panicked over a misunderstanding. Then he wrote the sentence that hurt her most. "If you loved me, you would fix what your father started." Claire turned her phone face down on the tray table. "How much debt does he have?" I asked. "I don't know." "Did he ever ask you for company money?" He asked whether we could invest after the building sold. I said, decisions needed all three of us. When? Before Christmas. Before the photograph. She saw me make the connection and shook her head. "Do not turn every memory into evidence." "I won't." That promise mattered. Suspicion can become its own kind of forgery when we force every old moment to carry a new meaning. I put my notebook away. When we landed, the bank's fraud officer had another fact. The proposed destination account belonged to Grant's development company. The name had been shortened on the transfer instruction, but the registered owner and tax identity matched his business. The $1,800,000 had not been heading toward a family investment. It had been heading toward my son-in-law. Claire sat in the airport assistance area with her suitcase between her knees. "Maybe someone used his company too," she said. It was possible. It was becoming less likely. I did not take her hand. I waited until she reached for mine. "If the recording proves it," she said, "I want to hear enough to know." "Enough for what?" "Enough to decide whether I walk into that bank beside you or beside him." That was not a decision I could make for her. I called the investigator and authorized the genuine fee call. The young woman placed it from her attorney's office that afternoon. Grant answered on the fourth ring. "Where were you this morning?" he asked. "I'm not going back to that branch," the young woman said. "You already used Claire's card once." You've told the agency it was training. That was what the agency needed to hear. The bank asked me questions about her parents, then used the answers I gave you and finished the review. And my 10,000? When the Hale wire clears into the project account, Claire is denying the email. Grant paused. The email came from her account. The member page has her name. If the wire dies, the file points where it points. You mean it points at your wife? Another pause. I mean you get paid if you finish. The call ended. The investigator preserved the original. Her attorney provided a statement confirming her consent and the reason for the call. A voice comparison could support identity later, but I recognized Grant before he finished the first sentence. Recognition was not enough for police. It was enough to make Claire sit down. The investigator played the complete call for us in his office. When Grant said, "You already used Claire's card once." Claire pressed both palms between her knees. Diane moved toward her. Claire lifted one hand. "Let me stay upright." My wife stopped. That was love too. Grant had not recited the whole crime. People do not explain familiar paperwork to a person already inside the job. His shorthand did something narrower and more believable. It confirmed that he knew about Claire's false card, had supplied personal answers, expected a second bank visit, tied the performer's payment to the Hale wire, and knew the file had been built to point at his wife. The rest had to come from independent sources. The bank video, casting contract, deposit payment, destination account, email session, disputed member page, and Grant's real debt deadline. I signed the identity theft affidavit for my name and company authority. Diane signed hers. Claire signed only for her own stolen identity and email. I gave the recording to the bank and police through counsel. That was the point of no return. Until then, Grant could still tell Claire that a husband's bad judgment belonged inside a marriage. Once I placed his own words with authorities, the question was no longer whether our family could keep a secret. It was what the evidence established. Claire removed her wedding ring and placed it in the zippered pocket of her purse. She did not announce a divorce. She simply said, "I need one day when it is not touching me." Grant learned that the performer would not attend the second verification when the bank cancelled it. He called Claire from a different number. This time she did not use speaker. I watched her listen. Her face changed from grief to attention. Then she said, "If you believe I did this, come say it in front of the bank." She ended the call. "He says you hired the actors to force me away from him," she told me. "Do you believe that?" "No." It was the first complete answer she had given since Hawaii. Grant sent the bank a written request to attend the fraud review as Claire's spouse and business advisor. He attached messages in which Claire had once discussed reinvesting part of the sale proceeds. The messages were real. The claim built around them was not. The bank allowed him to attend only as Claire's invited support person, with no authority over the account. Claire chose to let him come. "I want him in the room when the recording plays," she said. I asked whether she wanted me to make that request for her. "No, I want you to make it for yourself. I will make mine for me." So we each wrote to the fraud officer. My request said, I wanted the complete preserved call played before the person whose conduct had endangered our company. Claire's request said her husband had accused her of organizing the fraud, and she wanted that claim tested in her presence. The fraud officer agreed to an authorized review meeting. The licensed investigator would authenticate the recording. The fraud officer would serve as the independent official witness and decide only what the bank could decide. The financial crimes detective received the evidence separately. He would not sit in the room as part of a family exposure. Police would make their own decision after review. Neither the bank nor the detective worked for me. That limit made the meeting real. The night before it, I slept in the guest room at home because Diane and Claire stayed together in our bedroom. Grant had moved out of Claire's apartment by the time we returned. He said he would not sleep beside someone who treated him like a criminal. Claire did not ask him back. I lay awake looking at the family Christmas photograph on my phone. Grant had taken it. He had used it to make strangers resemble us, but he had not created the three people in the picture. He had only copied their surfaces. The next morning, I printed the photograph on ordinary office paper and folded it into my jacket. I did not know whether I would need it. I needed to carry something that belonged to the truth before it became an exhibit. Grant was already seated when we entered the bank's review room. He wore the navy suit from our daughter's wedding. Claire noticed too. For 1 second, her hand moved toward the ring inside her purse. Then she let it fall. Diane sat on Claire's left. I sat on her right. The bank fraud officer faced us across a plain table. The investigator took a chair near the wall. Grant looked at Claire, not at me. "I came because I want to clear your name," Claire answered. "Then tell the truth when they ask." The fraud officer described the meeting's limits. It was not a trial. The bank would decide whether the transfer instruction was genuine, how to protect the company account, and what records it was required to preserve or report. Grant said he understood. He denied hiring anyone. He said Claire had discussed investing in his development and may have tried to surprise him by arranging the transfer. He said I discovered it early, panicked, and built a fraud story because I never respected his business. The fraud officer placed the false company resolution on the table. "Did you prepare this?" "No." "Did you authorize anyone to impersonate Martin, Diane, or Claire Hale?" "Of course not." "Did you speak with the young woman who appeared as Claire?" "Not knowingly." The room became still. I unfolded the office paper photograph and laid it beside the resolution. The three faces on the false identity cards had been cut from that image. Grant looked at it for less than a second. "Lots of people had that picture," he said. He was right. A photograph proved access, not authorship. That was why I had not brought only a photograph. I looked at the fraud officer. "I am asking that the complete authenticated call be played now, with my family, Grant, and the bank present." Claire made the same request in her own words. The investigator identified the original file, the consenting participant, and the preserved copy. He stated that the young woman had called about a real unpaid fee with counsel present and had not been given a script. The fraud officer pressed play. Grant's recorded voice filled the room. "I'm not going back to that branch," the young woman said. "You already used Claire's card once. You told the agency it was training. That was what the agency needed to hear." Grant's face lost color. He said, "That recording is fake." The fraud officer paused the file. Claire leaned forward. "Please show him what sent the email." The officer turned a monitor toward us. The bank's preserved message had passed through Claire's active session on the shared home office computer, while her registered phone was in Hawaii. The attached resolution retained its revision history. The file had been created under a document license registered to Grant's development company. Its author field carried Grant Mercer's name. Claire's old template was no longer just a resemblance. The document itself carried the handoff from his business into her open account. Grant said Claire had asked him to prepare it. The fraud officer placed the retroactive member confirmation beside the forged resolution. "Then why did you ask her to approve your prior actions only after the transfer was frozen?" Grant did not answer. Diane did. "Before Christmas, you asked me whether all three owners still had to approve the sale money. I told you yes. My wife had remembered the question and chosen the room in which it mattered." The officer resumed the recording. Then came the contradiction Grant had just said did not exist. "The bank asked me questions about her parents. Then use the answers I gave you and finish the review." "And my 10,000? "When the Hale wire clears into the project account." Diane gripped the edge of her chair. Claire kept her eyes on Grant. "Claire is denying the email." Grant's recorded voice paused. "The email came from her account. The member page has her name. If the wire dies, the file points where it points." "You mean it points at your wife?" Another pause. I mean, you get paid if you finish. Claire made a sound I had never heard from her. Not a sob. It was the breath a person makes when grief finally becomes information. The file ended. No one spoke for several seconds. The playback had not repeated a complete confession. It turned Grant's denial into a contradiction. His own shorthand connected him to Claire's false card, the rehearsal answers, the cover story, the second visit, the performer's payment, and the project account. The bank officer watched Claire. Diane reached for our daughter's hand and waited until Claire turned her palm upward. Grant finally said, "You don't understand the pressure I was under." Claire's voice was almost gentle. "I understand exactly where you plan to put it." The bank fraud officer made the first formal decision. She rejected the $1,800,000 transfer as fraudulent. She locked the company profile against any instruction tied to the forged resolution, required fresh in-person authority from the 3 real managers, and accepted our signed identity theft reports into the bank's official record. She also confirmed the bank would preserve the video, false identification, resolution, and destination account trail for investigators and make the reports required of it. The money had never left. Our names had still been used. Stopping the wire did not make that harmless. The meeting ended without handcuffs. Grant looked at Claire. "You're going to let them blame me for something you wanted?" She did not answer for the law. She answered for herself. "I am not your hiding place." He walked out with his attorney while the bank kept the original records. Claire remained seated after the door closed. "He said you would forgive me," she whispered. "For what?" "For being stupid enough to marry him." I took the folded Christmas picture from the table. "Trusting a person is not signing his crime." Diane added, "And surviving someone's plan does not make the plan yours." Claire opened her purse, took out the wedding ring, and placed it in a small bank envelope. She wrote Grant's attorney on the front. That was her choice, not a sentence I imposed as her father. That afternoon, the investigator delivered the preserved call and consent statement to the detective. The bank supplied its video, email session record, document history, destination account trail, and false identification. Investigators tied the casting deposit to Grant's company payment record and verified his Friday debt deadline. A judge reviewed the combined affidavit and issued a warrant. The following morning, police arrested Grant at his development office on probable cause involving attempted bank fraud, identity theft, forgery, and conspiracy. An arrest was not a conviction. Grant had counsel and a court process. The important fact that morning was narrower. A judge had found enough corroborated evidence for police to act. Within several weeks, prosecutors filed charges against Grant. He pleaded not guilty. The case continued, and nothing in our family required me to pretend an arrest was already a conviction. The young impersonator kept cooperating through counsel. Authorities reviewed what each performer knew instead of treating 3 costumes as equal guilt. The casting service preserved its records, and Grant's lenders handled his unfinished project through their own contracts. I neither rescued nor destroyed it. The $1,800,000 remained frozen for another month, while the bank rebuilt the company profile and verified the genuine owners. When access returned, Diane, Claire, and I signed a new instruction together. We did not move the money into a secret account controlled by me. We divided the proceeds according to the ownership agreement we had made before any betrayal. Claire received her share under her sole control. Diane and I placed ours into ordinary retirement accounts with no authority for spouses, children, or helpful relatives. Boundaries worked best when they did not depend on which family member happened to be trusted that year. Claire filed for legal separation. She changed her personal and business access with professional help and communicated with Grant only through counsel. She did not ask my permission. I did not ask for a promise that she would never forgive him. Forgiveness, if it ever came, would not restore signatures, passwords, company authority, or the right to stand beside her at a bank. 3 months later, Diane developed the photograph from our first morning in Hawaii. Not the Christmas picture Grant had copied, the breakfast photograph. In it, Claire stood between us on the hotel terrace. Diane's yellow flower was fresh. My coffee cup was still in my hand. The server who had helped establish the time was laughing at the edge of the frame. Because none of us knew where to look, for weeks that photograph had been an alibi. It proved we were not the 3 people at the bank. I took it to a small print shop, owned by one of my former employees. I asked for 3Ps on thick matte paper, 1 for Diane, 1 for Claire, 1 for me. The employee asked whether I wanted a digital link to share with the family. I looked at Claire. She smiled and shook her head. "Paper is enough," she said. At home, I placed my copy in a plain wooden frame. I did not crop the server out. I did not correct the crooked horizon or brighten the shadow across my face. After a lifetime of printing, I knew how easily an image could be improved until it stopped telling the truth. Claire put her copy on the desk in her new apartment. The next time we visited, I saw that she had written the date on the back in her own hand. No shared account, no borrowed signature. No one else deciding what the picture meant. 3 strangers had looked enough like us to enter a bank. Grant had mistaken resemblance for ownership and marriage for permission. But a likeness can be manufactured. Belonging cannot.